We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
President Duterte made a courtesy call on Iglesia Ni Cristo Executive Minister Brother Eduardo Manalo.
The Trump administration is reversing a controversial policy that immigration advocates say caused thousands of unaccompanied migrant children to remain in shelters for extended periods.
Britain publishes proposals for an EU immigration crackdown after Brexit, as business groups warn the economy is not ready for Britain to crash out of the European Union without a divorce agreement in place.
And Elon Musk takes a break from futuristic electric cars and private space travel to unveil a low-cost tunnel he sees as a godsend for city traffic.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. President Duterte made a courtesy call on Friday on Iglesia Ni Cristo Executive Minister Brother Eduardo Manalo. This was President Duterte's third visit to the INC leader. The first time that Duterte visited Brother Eduardo was in April of 2016, a month before the 2016 presidential elections. During his latest courtesy call, the president also personally greeted the INC Executive Minister, who celebrated his birthday last October 31st.
Photos show a 2-year-old boy on life support in California whose Yemeni mother was granted a visa waiver to enter the U.S. according to the Council on American Islamic Relations. 2-year-old Abdullah Hassan, a U.S. citizen like his father, suffers from a rare genetic brain condition and is on life support in a hospital in Oakland, California. But his mother, Shaima Zwile, had been unable to join him due to President Donald Trump's order barring visitors from 6 countries, including Yemen.
In other news, the Trump administration is reversing a controversial policy that immigration advocates say caused thousands of unaccompanied migrant children to remain in shelters for extended periods. The Department of Health and Human Services is no longer requiring fingerprint checks for all adult members of a sponsor's household when the sponsor applies to take in unaccompanied minors. The fingerprint requirement began in June amid the zero-tolerance policy at the border that led to the separation of some 2,400 children from their parents. The children taken from parents were placed in shelters until a sponsor, often a parent or other family member, could be found and evaluated before releasing the children to that sponsor. The administration has come under significant pressure to reduce the population of children being held at the temporary site, including by people who run the holding facilities aimed at minors. The 14,700 minors in U.S. custody are not related to the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy, which resulted in more than 2,600 children being separated from their families at the border in a matter of weeks. Now, those children have mostly been reunited with their families upon a judge's orders. The remaining children in HHS custody are teens who were smuggled through Mexico with other groups of families and single adults.
The UN Refugee Agency, or UNHCR, launched a $2.7 billion appeal on Tuesday to help address Africa's largest displacement crisis in South Sudan, where millions have been uprooted by years of brutal civil war. Widespread fighting began there in 2013 between forces loyal to the President Salva Kiir and his Vice President Riek Machar, following the country's declaration of independence from its northern neighbor in 2011. Hundreds of thousands of people are believed to have been killed in the fighting, which has been accompanied by a shocking level of abuse. More than 65% of women and girls in the country have experienced sexual violence, according to UN-appointed rights experts. Although there has been a relative reduction in violence in parts of the country since a new peace deal was signed in September, UNHCR says conditions are not conducive for the safe return of refugees.
In Sudan, some refugees and their host communities are having to survive on just 5 liters of water per person per day, inevitably leading to tensions. Many women have reported rape and other forms of sexual and gender-based violence, along with the killings of their husbands and the abduction of children during flight. Children too have in many cases experienced extreme violence and trauma, including the death of one or both parents. Many have become primary caregivers to younger siblings. The issue here is that there have been previous attempts at cultivating peace that have not withstood.
More than 2.2 million South Sudanese are now refugees in 6 neighboring countries: Uganda, Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, the Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC, and Central African Republic, or CAR, and another 1.9 million have been uprooted from their homes inside their country. In some places, rations have had to be cut owing to a lack of funding, and in Sudan, some refugees who fled across the border and their host communities have access to just 5 liters of water per person per day, while children are out of school and health clinics lack doctors, nurses, and medicine.
In northern Japan, a large quantity of aerosol spray cans were reportedly stockpiled by a realtor at the time of a huge blast in the area. Japan broadcaster NHK reports that the explosion and the ensuing fire in Sapporo City, Hokkaido on Sunday destroyed a building housing the realtor and injured 42 people, including diners at the restaurant next door. Sources close to the investigation say employees of that realtor said that before the accident, they had emptied about 120 cans of the deodorizing spray inside. Now, the explosion occurred at around 8:30 p.m. local time in Toyohira Ward, resulting in a fire that was extinguished at around 2:10 a.m. An employee of the real estate agency told police about the disposal of the spray cans. It's suspected that gas from the cans ignited when a water heater was switched on. Now, police are investigating the reason for the overstock. Meanwhile, no Filipinos were hurt in this incident.
Korean Air on Wednesday was ordered to pay 20 million won, or that's $17,770, to a flight attendant who was kicked off an airplane by the firm's heiress in 2014 in a now infamous outrage episode. The incident where Air's Cho Yoon-ah angrily ejected the chief of the cabin crew from a taxiing airplane after being served macadamia nuts in a bag instead of a bowl made global headlines. The worker, Park Chung-jin, earlier sued Korean Air, claiming that the firm, the South flag carrier, unfairly demoted him to an ordinary cabin crew position for speaking out about the incident to the media. He also sued the firm and Cho, seeking compensation for physical and psychological suffering. Cho, then the firm's vice president, had forced Park and another flight attendant to kneel before her to apologize. A Seoul court accepted part of Park's argument and ordered Korean Air to pay him 20 million won, but dismissed the suit against Cho.
In other news, President Donald Trump has agreed to close down his personal charity, the Trump Foundation, the New York Attorney General said, accusing it of engaging in a shocking pattern of illegality to advance his political and business interests. Attorney General Barbara Underwood said that her investigation found, quote, a shocking pattern of illegality involving the Trump Foundation, including unlawful coordination with the Trump presidential campaign, repeated and willful self-dealing, and much more. The suit seeks $2.8 million in restitution and to bar Trump, Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka from serving on the boards of other New York nonprofits. According to the suit, Trump used foundation funds to settle lawsuits, promote his Trump-branded hotels, and for personal spending, including the purchase of a portrait that was displayed at one of his golf clubs. Now, in a statement to the BBC, Trump Foundation lawyer, meanwhile, Alan Futerfas, signatory to the deal closing the foundation, said, quote, contrary to the NYAG's New York Attorney General misleading statement, the foundation has been seeking to dissolve and distribute its remaining assets to worthwhile charitable causes since President Trump's victory in the 2016 presidential election. He said, unfortunately, the NYAG sought to prevent dissolution for almost 2 years, thereby depriving those most in need of nearly $1.7 million. Over the past decade, he said the foundation is proud to have distributed approximately $19 million, including $8.25 million of the president's personal money, to over 700 different charitable organizations with virtually zero expenses. He added the NYAG's inaccurate statement of this morning is a further attempt to politicize this matter.
U.S. President Donald Trump announces that his administration has issued a ban on bump stocks, the gunshot device that enables semi-automatic rifles to increase their firepower, which a shooter used in the deadly attack in Las Vegas in October 2017. Surrounded by a group of parents of school shooting victims and survivors, President Donald Trump also repeats his calls for armed personnel at schools to prevent attacks.
This morning, we also completed the process to issue a new regulation banning bump stocks. It's critical to have armed personnel available at a moment's notice. These are people, teachers in many cases, that are the highest trained that you can get. People that are natural to firearms, people that know how to handle them, people that have great experience, and on top of the experience have taken courses, and they're right on the site.
The devices or bump stocks allow semi-automatic weapons to fire like machine guns, and they were used in a mass shooting in Las Vegas in October 2017. The devices, which harness the recoil of a semi-automatic rifle's discharge to make the trigger fire faster, effectively turn the weapons into machine guns, which are illegal. The devices were used by Las Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock on a dozen rifles he deployed to kill 58 people and wound 500 at an open concert last year, the deadliest mass shooting in recent U.S. history. Public outcry over the incident prompted U.S. President Donald Trump to issue a memorandum in February instructing the Attorney General to ban the bump stocks. but his administration remains wary of tightening control over guns themselves. A deregulation is expected to spark debate in the United States as it faces stiff opposition from pro-gun advocates. A group called Gun Owners of America has called the ban unconstitutional and said it will file a lawsuit against the Justice Department.
Meanwhile, prospects of a partial U.S. government shutdown surged after Democrats rejected what they said was President Trump's request for a slush fund to build a wall on the U.S. border with Mexico. President Trump has stood firm for days, declaring he needed $5 billion to build the controversial wall, defiantly proclaiming he would be proud to stop some government operations cold after a midnight Friday deadline if he didn't get his wish. He appeared to ease that stance early Tuesday when the White House said it didn't want a shutdown and was looking for other ways to obtain funding, including getting Congress to reprogram $1 billion in unspent funds so Trump could use them on his immigration policies. Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer shut down the proposal, saying the $1.6 billion in border security funding in proposed legislation is sufficient.
Leader Schumer and I have said that we cannot accept the offer they made of $1 billion slush fund for the president to implement his very wrong immigration policies. So that won't happen. We've said before very clearly that we could possibly come together around a CR for all 7 bills. Better than that, 6 bills that have already passed the Senate committees, and 1 bill that is CR for Homeland Security. 6 in 1 or all 7 under a CR. We'll just see. I think that the White House has backed off the wall in that terminology, but what they might want to do with that $1 billion is problematic.
Now the deadlock leaves thousands of federal workers in limbo, wondering whether they will be sent home without pay 1 week before December 25. If Republican and Democratic lawmakers in Congress fail to reach an agreement on a spending package by midnight Friday, parts of the government will slide into a shutdown, paralyzing some Fed operations. The exact impact is difficult to foretell. About 75% of the government is already funded through September 2019. But a quarter of government operations still requires spending agreements and could face disruptions, including the Departments of Justice and Homeland Security. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he's confident there will be no work stoppage.
Well, he can speak for himself, but I think a government shutdown is not a good option. That's my view. The American people don't like it. I don't know how many times you remember my favorite country saying, there's no education, the second kick of a mule. We've been down this path before, and I don't believe we'll go down this path again. But look, we're in discussion. As I said, we're in discussion with the White House about the way forward.
The news continues here on Eagle News International. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Business News. This is Cesar Vallejos. President Duterte is expected to sign the rice tariffication bill, a measure he certified as urgent anytime soon, Malacanang said on Wednesday, but did not give a specific date. Presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo did not give a specific reason why it is taking time before the president signed the bill into law, but noted that the president had a lot of other tasks to prioritize. Agriculture Secretary Manny Piñol earlier said the National Food Authority will stop selling the 27 peso per kilo rice should the rice tariffication bill be signed into law. Sought for a comment, Panelo allayed fears that this would have an adverse effect on NFA rice buyers. On October 10, the President certified the rice tariffication bill as urgent in a letter addressed to Senate President Vicente Soto III and House Speaker Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. In his letter, Duterte said the measure is meant to address the urgent need to improve availability of rice in the country, prevent artificial rice shortages, reduce the prices of rice in the market, and curtail the prevalence of corruption and cartel domination in the rice industry. The rice tariffication bill is meant to replace import restrictions on rice with tariffs, lifting the quantitative restrictions on rice imports. It also mandates NFA to buy its buffer stock from farmers. Another feature of the proposed measure is the creation of the Rice Comprehensive Enhancement Fund, which earmarks 10 billion pesos a year for 6 years to ensure that all duties collected from imported rice will flow back to local farmers. World oil prices tumbled Tuesday to their lowest levels in more than a year, hit by fears over the outlook for the global economy and doubts over producers' resolve to cut output. The plunge in oil prices came on a mixed day for global stocks, with European and Asian markets falling in the aftermath of Monday's Wall Street rout. U.S. stocks mustered modest gains but finished well below their session peaks as worries about a possible U.S. government shutdown and a likely Federal Reserve rate hike weighed on sentiment. Oil prices had stabilized earlier this month when the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and Russia agreed to slash production by 1.2 million barrels a day. But Russia announced on Monday that its output had increased to more than 11.4 million barrels a day, a record, putting in doubt its commitment to coordinate policies with Saudi Arabia and other oil producers. On the same day, the Energy Department reported that the United States was producing 11.6 million barrels of crude oil a day, nearly a million barrels more than a year ago. The department projects that shale oil production will climb to record levels this month and increase by 134,000 barrels a day in January. Shares in Japanese telecoms giant SoftBank's mobile unit traded well below its IPO price on Wednesday in a disappointing debut on the Tokyo stock market despite raising a record amount. SoftBank's offering is valued at 2.6 trillion yen or about $23 billion. The group plans to invest its new funds into robot development and other areas of artificial intelligence. Celebrations around the launch were overshadowed by a SoftBank network crash earlier this month. The outage of phone and data communication services lasted for 4.5 hours, affecting more than 30 million subscriber lines. Another negative factor is SoftBank's use of telecom equipment made by Huawei. The Chinese maker's clients are increasingly voicing doubts about the security of its technology. Tokyo stocks closed lower on Wednesday as investors awaited the outcome of the U.S. Central Bank policy meeting, while the Japanese mobile unit of SoftBank, Soft Group, flopped on its debut. The benchmark Nikkei 225 index slipped 0.60% or 127.53 points to end at 20,987.92, while the broader Topix index was down 0.41% or 6.36 points at 1,556.15. The Nikkei index slipped again as investors are in a wait-and-see mode ahead of the FOMC, or the Federal Reserve meeting, and the yen strengthened, Okasan Online Securities said in a note. It was also affected by SoftBank shares trading below the IPO price on its debut, Okasan said. Shares in SoftBank's mobile unit traded well below the IPO price on Wednesday in a disappointing debut on the Tokyo stock market for the Japanese telecoms giant. Pharmaceutical giants GlaxoSmithKline and Pfizer on Wednesday announced a merger of their consumer healthcare units that produce over-the-counter medicines. GSK said it would have a 68% controlling equity interest in the joint venture that will have combined sales of about £9.8 billion, or $12.7 billion. The deal paves the way for British group GSK to have two UK-listed companies, one specialized in the development of drugs and the other in consumer healthcare. It comes as the pharmaceutical industry's biggest players seek out new blockbuster treatments following expiry of patents for some of their major drugs that has enabled smaller rivals to offer cheaper alternatives. In a separate statement, U.S. giant Pfizer said that the joint venture will be a category leader in pain relief, respiratory, vitamin and mineral supplements, digestive health, skin health, and therapeutic oral health, and will be the largest global consumer healthcare business. GSK Chief Executive Emma Walmsley said the transaction also presents a clear pathway forward for GSK to create a new global pharmaceuticals vaccines company focused on science related to the immune system, use of genetics, and advanced technologies. The British government says it is allocating £2 billion or $2.5 billion to fund Brexit and putting 3,500 troops on standby after ministers agreed to make no-deal planning an operational priority. The news came amid continued opposition to Prime Minister Theresa May's draft divorce deal just 14 weeks before the country leaves the EU. Following a meeting of her cabinet, the last before Parliament breaks for the holidays, Defense Secretary Gavin Williamson said around 3,500 troops would be on standby to help deal with any contingencies from the no-deal outcome.
We've as yet not had any formal requests from any government department, but what we are doing is putting contingency plans in place, and what we will do is have 3,500 service personnel held at readiness, including regulars and reserves, in order to support any government department on any contingencies they may need.
Mr. Speaker, with permission.
But Brexit Secretary Steve Barclay said ministers still hope to secure backing for May's agreement in a House of Commons vote delayed until next month. He added that any responsible government would intensify preparations for the default option of leaving the European Union without a deal on March 29 next year.
They want to agree the best possible future relationship with us. There is no clock.
Korean Airlines yesterday said it will raise refund penalties after K-pop fans got on a plane only to take pictures of a boy band on the flight, then demanded to get off before it left and got refunds on their tickets, according to Reuters. 3 101 fans boarded the Seoul-bound Korean Air flight in Hong Kong last Saturday, ignored flight attendants' requests to be seated, and instead took pictures of the 11-member K-pop band. When the K-pop band got on board, the fans flocked to where they were seated despite flight attendants' warnings. Shortly after, the fans demanded a refund and tried to get off the plane just minutes before takeoff. According to aviation law, if even one passenger gets off the plane before takeoff, all passengers must also get off and go through security checks, again for security safety reasons. Flight attendants told the fans about this, but the three insisted they wanted to get off the plane, forcing hundreds of passengers to disembark and go through another round of screening, which delayed the flight departure for about an hour. Korean Air not only had to give the three passengers a refund, but also had to compensate for the delayed flight. That's it for business news. This is Cesar Vallejos. I'm one with 25. Eagle News International will be back. Stay with us.
Health is a
Welcome back. I'm Jeffrey Angles and this is Environment News. EU countries and the European Parliament on Wednesday agreed details of a ban on single-use plastics, including plates, cutlery, and drinking straws in a bid to cut marine pollution. The new rules, which still need final approval before becoming law, target the top 10 items most frequently found littering European beaches. Plastic cotton bud sticks and expanded polystyrene food containers are also barred as the EU tries to cut back on products that account for huge quantities of waste in the world's oceans. Here's a video showing the challenges posed by plastics. EU countries and the European Parliament on Wednesday agreed details of a ban on single-use plastics, including plates, cutlery, and drinking straws, in a bid to cut marine pollution. Watch this.
Most plastics can be made from hydrocarbons present in natural gas, oil, and coal. They're made up of chains of molecules linked together called polymers. There are two main families of polymers. Thermoplastics, accounting for some 80% of global plastics consumption, they melt when heated and then harden when cooled. They can be recycled. Thermosets are substances that set permanently when heated. In 1950, the industry produced 2 million tons of plastics per year. Now that figure stands at 400 million tons. Plastics can be made into a huge variety of useful products. But here's the rub. Millions of tons of plastics end up in the oceans and landfill sites every year. A plastic beverage bottle takes more than 400 years to degrade. Less than 1/5 of plastic waste is currently recycled. Because of the chemical complexity of polymers, recycling presents major technical and environmental challenges. So in the end, it can be cheaper to make new plastic than to recycle it. So what can be done to help solve the problem? Massive investment in so-called bioplastics, natural polymers from agricultural waste, and biodegradable plastics. The use of high-quality recyclable plastics. High taxes on plastics production. Pressure on corporations to stop using plastics altogether and invest in alternative packaging.
New NASA research confirms that Saturn is losing its iconic rings at a maximum rate estimated from Voyager 1 and 2 observations made decades ago. The rings are being pulled into Saturn by gravity as a dusty rain of ice particles under the influence of Saturn's magnetic field. We estimate that this ring rain drains an amount of water products that could fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool from Saturn's rings in half an hour, said James O'Donegal of NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. Scientists have long wondered if Saturn was formed with the rings or if the planet acquired them later in life. Scientists say the rings, which are mostly made up of chunks of water ice, might disappear in less than 100 million years as gravity pulls them into Saturn as dusty rain of ice particles. In other news now, U.S. President Donald Trump ordered the creation of Space Command, a new organizational structure within the Pentagon that will overall control of military space operations. The command will be separate from Trump's goal to build an entirely new branch of the military called Space Force, which has not received approval from Congress. Vice President Mike Pence on Tuesday announced the creation of the U.S. Space Command under Trump's directive. Pence said the command will integrate space capabilities across all branches of the military to defend the United States in a new era. SpaceCom, as it will inevitably come to be known, will be the Pentagon's 11th combatant command. America's vast military divides the globe into various commands such as Central Command in the Middle East or Indo-Pacific Command in Asia. The new Space Command would be on equal footing with these. It will require a new headquarters as well as a commander and deputy commander who will need Senate approval. The Trump administration plans to establish this new branch of the military by 2020 in the face of growing competition from Russia and China. Elon Musk unveiled his underground transportation tunnel. This is the tech entrepreneur's answer to what he calls soul-destroying traffic. The sample tunnel is part of Musk's vision to have an underground network that cars, preferably Teslas, can be lowered to by lifts, then slotted into tracks and propelled along at speeds of up to 150 miles per hour. Tunnels will eventually be open to all compatible self-driving electric vehicles, but for now, Boring is using the Teslas in the tube. The idea for the project came to the billionaire of South African origin when he was fuming at the wheel of his car, trapped in traffic jams between his chic Bel Air villa and the SpaceX offices in Hawthorne. It is a journey that takes him more than 90 minutes and he considered soul-crushing. The tunnel test unveiled Tuesday appeared simple. A narrow tube, only 3.65 meters in diameter, freshly painted white, in which a Tesla Model X is fitted with tracking wheels to stay in a track and avoid bumping the walls. In Tokyo, let's see the anime characters at Bandai Character Street. Here's Tyra Liu.
Hi! Behind me today is the famous producer of Japanese anime, the company Bandai. For the locals, this place is just considered as ordinary or just a normal place, but not for tourists.
Passing by this street, you will see a lot of travelers taking their photos with these all-time famous characters displayed just outside the building along Edo Street in Kumagata, Taitoku, Tokyo. The company changes the characters displayed from time to time, so what you might have seen a few years back may not be the same with what are on display now.
Doraemon.
Doraemon, the blue robotic cat that travels back in time from the 22nd century to help his friend Nobita, has been one of the kids' favorites here.
Whoever doesn't know this famous anime character must have lived under the rock.
Son Goku is the main protagonist character in the anime series Dragon Ball Z. He has been displayed here since 2017. This is the Bandai's head office, a giant toy manufacturer that aims to foster creativity and dreams among kids and non-kids alike.
Reporting from Tokyo, Japan, this is Tyra Liu for Eagle News International, and I am 1 with 25.
Thank you, Tyra, and that is all for me. I'm Jeffrey Angles, and I'm 1 with 25. Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Health is our most important asset, and it should always be a constant effort to seek ways to take care of it. That includes professional medical help from the best available. The Manila-Beijing Medical Associated Incorporated is known as one of the most specialized centers
Here's Ben Bernaldez for our sports news.
Yuday Shigoka has long dreamed of becoming a world boxing champion, but a decision that could see the sport excluded from the 2020 Olympics might deal his hopes a knockout blow. The International Olympic Committee said last month it was suspending preparation for boxing at the Tokyo 2020 Games over governance concerns, leaving Japanese boxers in limbo.
選手からすると、目の前のもうすぐだった夢がちょっと消えちゃうっていうのは、正直ショックなことではあります。
The IOC took the decision over concerns about the sport's troubled governing body, the International Boxing Association, which is now under investigation by the Olympic Committee. IOC President Thomas Bach declined to promise that boxing would be part of the 2020 Games, though he pledged at a Tokyo press conference to make all efforts to protect the athletes, as we always do. Japan's Boxing Federation is taking the issue seriously, with its president warning of major damage to the boxing world if the sport is excluded from 2020 Games. The number of boxing athletes could decline because of this, President Satanobu Uchida told the media. In NBA, D'Angelo Russell produced a double-double to lead the Brooklyn Nets to victory against his former club with a 115-110 win over LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers on Tuesday. Russell was selected by the Lakers with the second overall pick in the 2015 draft, but was traded only 2 years later after an unhappy start to his NBA career. However, the 22-year-old point guard reminded the Lakers of his talents with a decisive contribution to lead the Nets to victory at Brooklyn's Barclays Center. Russell finished with 22 points, 13 assists and 4 rebounds as the Nets improved to 14-18 in the Eastern Conference standings. Russell was one of the 6 Brooklyn players to finish in double digits as the home side completed a 6th straight victory. Russell said the Nets were determined to extend their winning run. Russell's points tally included a clutch three-pointer down the stretch which put the Nets 6 points clear with 22 seconds remaining. Jared Dudley weighed in with an important 13-point, came off the bench to keep Brooklyn in front during a nail-biting finale. The Lakers meanwhile looked to James to keep them in the contest. James finished with 36 points but was unable to drag the Lakers over the line, despite a spirited rally late in the fourth quarter when they ran up 10 unanswered points to get within 3 of Brooklyn. James also had a double-double with 13 rebounds and 8 assists in the losing effort. Lonzo Ball finished with 23 points and Kyle Kuzma had 22 points. The Lakers dropped to 18-13 after the loss and remained in 4th spot in the Western Conference. Meanwhile, these are the results of the other games today in the NBA. For EN Sports, I'm Ben Bernaldez and I'm 1 with 25.
Thank you, Ben. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles and we're 1 with 25.
If you want to experience